All right, we're started. So, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Aware Athlete Show. The Aware Athlete, connecting to the life you want. All of our shows are about connecting to the life you want and to the world around you. So tonight, I'm very pleased to have as our guest, Todd Hargrove. And Todd is a former attorney, and he's also currently now a rolfer and a Feldenkrais practitioner. So Todd has written a book on a very important subject, and the book is titled Playing with Movement, and it's a clear and comprehensive look at what playing with movement is and why you should care about it. So I hope by the end of this interview, you'll really understand how important the subject is. So without any further words, and I realized, Todd, that I didn't answer your whole question about my background, so maybe we can get to that later. But without any further words, I want to thank Todd for being here tonight. So thank you, Todd.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great. So would you like to say a few words about switching occupations, how you got to be a rolfer and a Feldenkrais practitioner, and what is a rolfer and a Feldenkrais practitioner?
Yeah, well, I was an attorney for about 10 years, and during that time I was having a little bit of chronic pain that was probably related a little bit to the physical and emotional stress of being an attorney and being kind of cooped up behind a desk. And at the same time, I was very interested in sports. I was played rackets. I played tennis in college, and after college, I was really interested in competing at squash. And so I was kind of reading a lot on the internet about how you deal with chronic pain, how you become a better mover. It was around 2005 when the idea of like movement quality was just starting to become a little bit more popular. Guys like Gray Cook and Mike Boyle were trainers that were also talking to the physical therapists, and the physical therapists were talking to the trainers about how quality of movement helps athletic performance and also might be able to make you feel better. So this whole idea of moving better and feeling better was very, very interesting to me. I was reading as much as I could about it. I was trying as many different kind of exercise plans as I could to, kind of move better and feel better. I was successful, and at some point I became more interested in that than being an attorney, so I went off to school to be a rolfer, which is a kind of deep tissue massage, which, again, it's oriented towards improving people's function and getting them out of pain. And I eventually also did a training in the Feldenkrais method, which has kind of the same goals, but it goes about it in a way of like using these gentle, mindful movements, kind of like Tai Chi-ish type movements. And I find those to be kind of complementary in their goals, and that's kind of how I just got into all this stuff. Started writing a blog at bettermovement.org, eventually wrote a book called A Guide to Better Movement, and now this Playing with Movement. All of them basically about moving better and feeling better, better function, less pain.
Yeah. So what I'm thinking is I think that rolfing has been called structural integration.
Yeah.
And then the Feldenkrais hand-on work, of course, is called functional integration. So, rolfing actually, the original intent was actually almost to change the structure a little bit.
Yeah, that's a greite distinction there. And I think that Ida Rolf and Feldenkrais actually, were contemporaries, and they spoke with each other about this distinction. And in my opinion, Feldenkrais had it right. Both structure and function are very important for your movement. You need a good structure to move well. However, I think that you're unlikely to change someone's structure through just putting your hands on them and working with them. And that was Rolf's original idea, is that by doing a deep tissue massage on people, you could affect the structure of the fascia, which is this really important stuff that goes throughout your whole body. No doubt it plays an important role in your movement. However, I don't think that we can change someone's fascia just by putting our hands on them. I do think that putting your hands on someone can have all sorts of interesting neurophysiological effects, and that can get someone moving better and feeling better. And eventually a lot of rolfers started to think, oh, that's really what we're doing. It reminds me of Feldenkrais' good line about I'm after flexible brains, not flexible bodies. So the intention of his work is kind of directed at affecting the nervous system, and that's the way I thought about rolfing. What we're doing here is modulating the nervous system. Anytime someone's doing kind of any kind of massage work, that's what I think is really the mechanism and the target for getting things done. So same kind of, I use a kind of a Feldenkrais thinking applied to my rolfing work.
Right. So a lot of times you don't have people directly do Feldenkrais work get down on the floor, roll around, do ATMs, awareness through movement lessons, but you still can use the thinking in a lot of
yeah, absolutely. The Feldenkrais specific method of doing things, like you say, rolling around on the floor in a really slow way, is not highly available and accessible to everyone. There's only, for one thing, there's only a certain amount of people that want to do that. But the Feldenkrais way of thinking about how change happens, I believe, is very, very, very broadly applicable to many, many different situations. It's kind of a profound, deep way of understanding how the way we think is related to the way we move, is related to the way we act. And I think that can be used by anyone no matter what they're doing.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. Not working against the nervous system and meeting people where they are. That idea can be used no matter what you're doing.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So can you tell us now, what does it mean to play with movement? What's playing?
Yeah, so I understand the way I use play is kind of roughly in contrast to the word work. So if you're doing something, if you're playing, you're kind of trying to solve a problem in a way that's probably fun and variable and intuitive and open-ended and curious and exploratory, and you're not really following a map. Whereas if you're working with solving a problem, what you're doing might be kind of boring, repetitive. You might be following a very precise set of instructions, taking objective measurements, and you're only doing it to accomplish some external purpose. It's not really meaningful in and of itself. It's only meaningful to do something else. So if you're playing with movement, you're engaged in movement, which is kind of fun, variable, intuitive, meaningful in its own sake. And if you're working with movement, that's the kind of training that takes discipline to continue. You're following a prescribed plan of reps and sets and stuff like that. Now, both of these things are useful, and both of them have their value. You're probably not going to ever be an elite athlete if you don't do a lot of working with movement. Yes. By that, I mean grinding out a lot of sets and reps of hard stuff that takes a lot of discipline to complete. However, I think as a society, we've tipped the balance towards work and away from play, and you can see that in various ways, and I think it's causing a lot of bad effects in the way we educate kids to be better movers, in the way we train athletes, and in the way we treat pain.
Yeah, so really the best of both worlds is to combine those in some kind of a intrinsically beneficial way then.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of this is really common sense. If you don't enjoy your workouts, if you're not motivated to do them, you're not going to show up for them as often. That just makes sense. Grinding it out on the Stairmaster alone in an air-conditioned gym, a lot of people, to them, that's just a miserable activity, and they only do it so they can look better in a bathing suit.
Yeah.
And that might be some sort of a motivation, looking better in a bathing suit, but it's not as powerful of a motivation as something that's actually fun to do, like surfing or golfing or going hiking with your friends. Decent amount of research backs this up. When people are doing an exercise program that's intrinsically meaningful to them, they're going to do it a lot more than something that's meaningless, but they think will deliver some reward in the future.
Right. And that's something I want to remind our listeners about, is that your book is really well researched, and anything you're saying here tonight is really backed up by studies and comprehensive notes and so on in the back of the book. So
yeah, thanks. This is not just kind of a romantic argument that play is really fun and all that kind of stuff. The play is really, it's kind of, in a way, it's serious business. I think one of the things that people get confused. One reason I don't love the word play is that it kind of suggests regression to a childlike state where you're engaged in some sort of trivial or silly activity. Yeah. That's not really what I'm talking about. Like even kids, when they're playing, let's take a kid who's playing with the toy, who's playing with learning how to crawl. That's serious business. They're trying to solve a very important problem. So play is a kind of a problem-solving technique, and the seriousness of it, I think, is conveyed by, let's say, the way a scientist would think about a really serious problem. They'd play with the idea in their mind. They'd kind of brainstorm. They'd open-ended think about things in a very associative type of a way.
And then they're likely to smile when they find the result.
they're going to smile. And there's a line that I quote from Isaac Asimov, is the most interesting thing to hear in science is not eureka, but that's interesting.
Yeah.
Or that's funny.
Yeah.
And what he means is that science is really propelled forward by this curiosity, by discovering something that doesn't make sense, kind of a trial and error type of a thing. It's not following a map to a super specific destination. Whenever you've got a complex problem, and movement is a complex problem, you have to explore. You have to be comfortable with encountering the unexpected and almost kind of thrive on that. And that's what's going to help you become a better mover. It's also going to help you get out of pain, because anytime you're in pain, you're in the forest. There's not someone that's going to say, I know exactly how to fix your problem and here's how to do it.
That's right.
You're going to have to figure out a lot of things for yourself. It's going to be a little bit scary, a little bit risky, but you're going to get a better result if you go out and explore unknown territory.
Yeah. And the result, it is self-discovery, and it is something that you can take with you. Then it reminded me, you've got some light, let's say humorous analogies that you use with cheetah cubs and young animals playing instead of working out. But it reminded me of my granddaughter, because this is a really funny story, because they used to put her in a crib. Well, she was getting just old enough that she was learning to climb a little bit. So somehow they got a video of her, and they put her. Well, what happened is they put her in bed, and then in a minute she's in the crib, and then in a minute she comes out. And so they put her back in the crib, but this time they filmed it, and she climbed up over the crib, got out of it, and she said, "I don't think so, crib." He had solved that problem.
Yeah. Well, that reminds me, one of the themes in the book is that, the environment matters for movement.
Yeah.
So if you put a kid in they're not going to learn crawling very well, but they are going to learn climbing.
Yeah. Yeah. So so one of the early subjects that you bring up in one of the chapters, laying the groundwork for this discussion of playing with movement, is the idea of complexity. So we just discussed playing with movement a little bit. So what's so complex about it? Why do we need to worry about complexity?
Yeah. So, I mean, the idea of complexity is a theme that runs out throughout the book. And part of the idea is that if you've got a complex problem, you do need this kind of playful attitude towards solving it, because it's a multiple dimensions that you're dealing in. And so therefore exploration is necessary. Following a precise map is probably not going to get it done.
Yeah.
So for example, with movement, you've got hundreds of joints and hundreds of muscles that link up to them in all these different angles. So I analogize, trying to control a human body as like trying to control a marionette with like thousands of strings and like all these different moving areas.
Right.
It's an incredibly complex problem. And this is why no one's able to make a robot that can barely even load a dishwasher. So I think it's a cool idea to appreciate that anytime you move your body around and do anything, it's just a task of enormous complexity. Mm-hmm. And you don't even know what your muscles are doing at any one time. The conscious mind has a very, very limited ability to even be aware of what's going on. All of this stuff is going on under the hood. And there's kind of a trend in corrective exercise and physical therapy and personal training where you're asking people to kind of try to be very aware of your body as you move. Try to control it instead of kind of letting it flow and being kind of more aware of the environment. Well, directing your attention towards the environment and just kind of not worrying so much about your body is probably a better way to get it coordinated than think, okay, I got to brace this muscle, make sure that muscle's firing, make sure I've got the alignment there right. That type of attention on your body has been shown by research to be counterproductive in certain ways, whereas the attention probably belongs on the environment as you're trying to do something and let the body self-organize. So that's one of the reasons complexity comes up in the book in terms of coordination.
Right. So if I could just tell you, say you're running and I see, or you see you're having a little problem here or there, you're getting injured or you're not running as fast as you'd like to. So if I just say lift your knees a little higher, that's going to be absolutely meaningless to our motor control systems. they actually have to play and experiment with that.
Yeah, like lifting the knees higher. The motor control system doesn't really know what that means. But if you told the motor control system, hey, run over these hurdles, your knees would necessarily lift higher.
Right.
And then so that would be a way to kind of do the same thing, but in a way that's kind of speaking the language of the motor control system. Yeah.
Right. So that makes sense with relating to the environment, which is one of the reasons your book is important. It's very important, but it also summarizes the Feldenkrais method pretty well, and from the particular aspect of playing with movement and relating to the environment.
Yeah. I don't talk about Feldenkrais that much in the book. And actually, my previous book, A Guide to Better Movement, it's much more Feldenkrais-ish. I kind of mention him a few times, and I include a lot of Feldenkrais lessons. But your teacher, Frank Wildman, he has a phrase that I really like, is that Feldenkrais lessons are like highly structured baby play.
Yeah, they are.
Have you heard that one?
Well, more or less. I mean, they're very
so the basic idea is, not only the baby, but the process where the teacher, and this is the end result, they're just giving you a certain movements to go through, and you're going to kind of figure it out on your own.
Right. So
just like a baby, no one tells a baby this is how to crawl. They just give the baby a floor, and most babies end up crawling pretty much the same way if they're given a floor.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. Once you look around and you see that you want to obtain something, you've got to get there.
Yeah. The part of what gets the baby crawling is the motivation to do something. And
right.
Again, that's the play idea, is that the motivation is what controls your movement. You need to be motivated to get something done.
Yeah.
But one of the things I say in the book is that, in kind of a more in the modern environment, we still have this urge to explore. Where's the interesting exploration? It's done on a computer or an iPad. You can explore the virtual world, and that's where we sit on the couch and we explore that way. If you take that away, you're more motivated to go out and explore the world outside. That's another way that the environment really matters.
Yeah, that's true. The internet is makes so much available to us that we almost have no excuse for not knowing the meaning of a word, or it's so easy to learn almost anything, but you're not learning necessarily to relate to the environment in a very real way. So another subject you bring up that's right in the area of complexity is I think you did a wonderful job using some diagrams and some explanation of explaining systems thinking. So that fits right into the idea of complexity. Could you tell us what is systems thinking?
Yeah, systems thinking is, I would say, it's kind of a general group of ideas and theories and kind of different branches of science that started to get going in, I think, the mid-20th century. And it was kind of a reaction to the perceived limitations of kind of classical, scientific, reductionistic kind of science in being able to deal with complex problems. So your classic way of doing science is to take a very big whole and break it into, and you're going to understand that by breaking it down into a bunch of small parts. So we understand a body by saying it's made out of cells, and the cells are made out of molecules. Molecules are made of atoms. This is an incredibly successful way to do science. It has all these great insights. However, if there's very, very, very many parts of your whole interacting in a very dynamic way, it may be impossible to account for all of them and account for all of the interactions. And then this method of doing science is not going to be very effective because the whole is so much greater than the sum of its parts. And so you end up not making any progress in understanding something like an economy or a social system or why certain videos go viral. All those things are totally unpredictable.
Yeah.
So there's a style of thinking that tries to get away from understanding the whole in terms of the parts and looking more at the level of the whole, looking at how the system, how the different parts of the system relate to each other might be more informative. And what you find out is that different types of systems actually have very similar dynamics, even though they're very different than each other. So like a stock market crash is kind of similar to a cattle stampede. It's kind of similar to what happens to your body when you get an injury. There's these vicious cycles and positive feedback loops where everything ramps up on top of each other.
Yeah.
Another thing I find really interesting is that any kind of a system, and a complex adaptive system like a plant or a human body, it thrives on variability. It's always changing the way it works, which is super different from a machine. We tend to analogize bodies to machines, and machines are very regular in everything they do. If there's a given input, there's always the same output, and the movement at a joint is always uniform. If the movement at a joint of a machine was kind of variable, if it was moving around, if there was play at the joint, what would we do? We shut it down, right?
Yeah.
That's a bad thing. It's a dysfunction, and this has affected the way we've looked at human bodies. When we see variability, we're going to say that's a dysfunction if we use the machine analogy. But if we're more familiar with the health of complex adaptive systems, we're going to look at variability as a feature, not a bug. This is a healthy thing. This is a good thing. People that are really, really coordinated movers are very variable in their movement. They can always alter the movement to affect the needs of the moment. And that's why Feldenkrais knew this. When he has people trained to do a movement better, what does he do? He has them do the same movement in many, many, many different ways, different orientations to gravity, different variations, and that's what teaches them how to move, which is kind of different than this very repetitive drill-based way of teaching movement that we often see in sports and physical therapy.
Yeah. Now you just brought up sports and physical therapy. So in the first place, what you said there, which I think is wonderful, is that that way of doing science where you break things down is extremely valid. That's a great thing.
Yeah, it's not a fallacy. I don't like it when people say that's a fallacy.
Well, in the Feldenkrais method, what do? You differentiate and integrate. So first you may look at a little part, but you have to fit that back into the whole system again.
Exactly. Yeah. They're both, or another way I've heard it said is they're both complementary perspectives on solving a problem. Sometimes one works for you and sometimes the other, and very often both.
Yeah. So, what you just said, you mentioned physical therapy and sports. Well, physical therapy, what you're saying here in the entire book is slightly controversial if you would talk to a physical therapist. Know what I'm talking about. I work in physical therapy.
Oh.
Yeah, a PTA, and also a Feldenkrais practitioner. But so physical therapy has been described as strength and stretch. That's not a very comprehensive definition, maybe, but
if you only had 3 words, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Or duct tape and DW40.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Kinesio tape and and pull that thing out and stretch that leg out. So in that regard, I would. What do you think? Do you think that the world of movement in general, the world of physical therapy, is it becoming more enlightened in terms of the thing that we're talking about right now, which is synergy and system thinking?
Yeah, I think definitely. I hang out with my little niche group of people online, and most of them are physical therapists. And they're all very much in line with the way I think. And a lot of what they are doing is try to kind of change probably what's more of a mainstream practice in physical therapy, change what they would probably call a very biomedical approach to physical therapy, which you might call a very biomechanical approach, where you're kind of looking at the body as a machine. You're assuming that the cause for pain or poor function can be located in one specific area, and that you can correct that area with some sort of targeted intervention. That view is really being challenged in favor of one that says that pain is very, very often multidimensional. There's bioelements, there's psycho elements, there's social elements. You need to respect the complexity of pain and understand that it's multifactorial, multidimensional. And your chances of fixing problems with pain by intervening at one level are not that good. So this is an enlightened message I see in the physical therapy community. I don't know what percentages of it would be there, but out of the people that I communicate with online, which is actually a pretty big group, there's a lot of them that would say that for sure.
Yeah, well, that's good. That's hopeful, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we end up being more appreciative of the complexity of being a human being, right? So,
yeah.
Yeah. So now you've kind of gotten us into another area here, which is, it's all the same area, but another little part of it, and that is being a human being. So now we're talking. As you brought up there, looking at the body as a machine, what's the first thing you learn in kinesiology? You learn about levers and fulcrums. So there's that example. But in terms of being a human being, on the interview last week, we were talking about the nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, and the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. And so now we're talking about being a human being, the complexity. So with a bicycle, if the chain breaks, that was a mechanical stress. So you manage that by putting on another chain. But with human beings, like you said, with machines, we try to limit variability at joints. With humans, we can't do that because even the knee has a little rotation in it.
Yeah.
Well, we call the knee a hinge, but it's actually more complex than that. And the good thing about that is we have redundancy and a lot of different ways to do things. If now something happens and we can't do something a certain way, but we could maybe do it another way. Whereas the bicycle can only use that chain.
Yeah.
So now we have to think in terms of, instead of mechanical stress, we have to think in terms of biological stress. So that becomes another factor if you're going to help yourself or if you're going to help somebody else.
Yeah.
So in fact, I think you can find that, let's say that you're having a movement difficulty, maybe your knee hurts. I'm thinking of an example here, but maybe your knee hurts and maybe you're very depressed or anxious. Well, that depression or anxious is not a factor with a bicycle, but with a human being, that may be a big factor on why your knee hurts. So
yeah, you never know. Yeah.
Could you comment on how stress then fits into the picture of improving movement?
Yeah, well, I mean, you've got like you say, you've got all these different systems that are involved in getting you to be a healthy mover. There's an immune system and a cardiovascular system, a musculoskeletal system. Some of those systems work in a fairly simple biomechanical way, like you said, like knees and bones and muscles. And some of them work in a really, kind of a liquid way, like the endocrine system, just like diffusing all these things around. And some of them are like a telephone system, like the nervous system. And they all work together. And it can be very overwhelming to think about all the things that are going on there. But I think that the way to simplify it is to appreciate that anytime we go out and move in a way that's meaningful to us, we're kind of engaging and stressing and challenging all of those systems in a beneficial way. So let's say I go for a hike with my friends, and it's kind of challenging to my coordination. It's challenging to my motivation to keep going. It's going to challenge many of the different systems in my body, and kind of encourage all of them to, beneficially reorganize themselves. Because stress, too much stress is bad for us, but the right amount of stress causes positive adaptations. The kind of stress that we evolved to deal with best is physical stress. When we're motivated to do a physical activity, like hiking or climbing, something like that, if it's fun to us, it's a pretty good chance that that activity is providing us with a kind of stress which is healthy to us. So you can kind of simplify all this complexity by saying, hey, let's just go do movements if you go do movement that's playful, it's probably engaging a lot of the systems that you're probably trying to improve in a healthy way and in a healthy amount. Because if you are, as long as the movement feels good and it feels playful, you're probably not working too hard. You're probably giving yourself a challenge because, too much, or if it's not enough or if it's too much, probably you wouldn't be as interested in doing it anyway. Now, not everybody's psychology is well calibrated enough to make them always want to do the things that are healthy for them. A lot of people really, really want to do, CrossFits or marathoning, at a level that's not healthy for them anymore. But as a general rule, the things that we want to do are a decent guideline as to what's good for us.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So that brings us, you were talking about, again, maybe it would be healthy just to go out and do a hike if that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
So then you're kind of touching on an area that's near to my heart, which is hiking, and relating to the natural environment, which is, if you use the word environment, it means more than one thing. But what can you say about just relating to the natural environment for movement health?
Yeah, well, there's a little bit of research on the benefits of moving in natural environments. I know there's a little bit on, for example, the way people move and feel running on a treadmill versus running outside. Yeah. It seems that when people running outside, they self-select a higher pace and a little bit more work. And then when they're done, they'll say it actually felt easier. Yeah. And this may be because they're not exactly sure why this is, but one might be that when you're out running, you're actually getting visual feedback that you're going somewhere, as opposed to visual feedback that you're staring at the same wall. Yeah. So there's something that's telling your body this is a meaningful event. Something's actually happening. Yeah. The other might be that humans just they just like natural environments. Yeah. And it kind of beneficially affects the psychological system, the immune system. I think there's some studies showing that people in hospitals after surgeries or if they are just looking outside at a brick wall, they won't do as well as if they're looking out on some green grass. Yeah. I don't know how replicable that kind of a thing is, but there's other research looking at, we like natural environments. It's a pretty common sense thing. We socialize more in natural environments, and that's a factor for motivating us to adhere to exercise programs. So in general, I'm a fan of getting outside. If you're motivated to go in a gym and work out in your garage gym, that's fine too. I like to do that as well. Yeah, yeah. So do you want to comment then, not just on the natural environment, but how about the social environment? Social environment, yeah, for sure. And this is common sense too. If you're out walking with a friend, you're probably going to walk longer and harder than if you're walking by yourself, because humans like people. There's lots of other ways that social environments affect movement. If you look at people that really enjoy sports and team events, probably relates to the fact that they had positive social experiences doing those things when they were a kid, and the people that don't probably had bad experiences. Yeah. Like people that were traumatized by gym class when they were young because, people were pegging them with the dodgeball. That stuff carries over, and that makes a big difference. I imagine there's a lot of people that fit in the category of some trauma during gym class. Yeah, people get traumatized during gym class. Some people don't like to dance unless no one's around. Some people do like it because because they like to show off. Things like CrossFit and Zumba and Pilates classes are well attended, partly because of the social element. I don't know if I should say Pilates class, but these classes where there's lots of social interaction in them and music playing and everyone moving to the same rhythm, that can be very, very motivating. The types of team sports that people like to play. I know I like to play sports where I like my teammates. Yeah. But it's very motivating to me. And over the years, I've played a ton of soccer, even though I'm not that good at it. Just because my buddies were playing on the team. And I see kids, I see parents talking about, I thought my kid liked soccer, but now he seems to like basketball. But it's not that he decided he likes basketball more than soccer. It's that his friend moved from playing basketball to soccer, and what he really likes is being with his friends. Yeah, there's a very, very powerful influence. And so you're talking about the social environment coming outward and influencing us, but then we can actually turn that around a little bit. So let's say you've made some kind of a movement discovery. So that gives you something to share in the social environment also, that maybe you can help somebody else make that movement discovery. And there's a sort of a back and forth with the social environment. Yeah. So absolutely. I mean, there's movement communities online. These little communities weren't even around a decade ago, but now you can find lots of them online where people are sharing information about, how they got better at, you name it, anything. So, I mean, this is a way that the modern world and the internet can be incredibly helpful, is helping people find these weird little niche interests that if you were just in a town and all you could communicate with was the people of the town, there might not even be one person in the town that's interested in, kettlebells or club bells or capoeira or whatever, but you can find an online community of people that are interested in that thing, trading information about it. Probably a lot of it is bad information, but a lot of it's very motivating, and that gets people moving, and I'm a strong supporter of that.
Yeah. So can you comment on the difference between mobility and flexibility?
Oh, yeah. So I talk about this a little bit in the book. Flexibility is basically how much range of motion you have at a joint. How far can you stretch from A to B, and mobility, I think, is people will usually say it's kind of about how well you move near the end range of motion. So two people might have the same flexibility in, say, a squat. They both go the same distance in a squat, but the mobility might be very different, because one person, when they get to that end range of motion, they have speed, they have balance, they have control, they have power. Most athletes in your average team sports don't have exceptional flexibility in terms of being able to achieve huge ranges of motion. They can't do the splits. They won't put their palms on the floor in a forward bend. But what they can do is when they get to an end range of motion, they can perform, again, with the power, with the speed, with the balance, all that kind of stuff. So for most people, I think that having a goal of improving mobility might be a little bit better idea than flexibility. And Andrew Spina's got a line about this too that I think is pretty good. You can think of mobility as being kind of like flexibility plus strength. So it's kind of like you're strong at that end range. It's not just you're going really far. It's that when you get pretty far, you're still strong.
So it's great coordination, using what you have to the best.
Yeah.
So, all right. So now we're going to come to, as you come to the end of the book, you actually are talking about pain, which is actually, we come full circle, because that's what got you from being an attorney to a role for an NFL.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So now we've come full circle, and we're coming back to something that I think was really important to you. And I think most people have some kind of a story when they study the Feldenkrais method. It very often involves pain or lack of function somehow. But we've come right back to your beginning now. So let's talk a little bit about chronic pain.
Go ahead. Sorry.
How's it different from acute pain?
Oh, yeah. Well, I guess I could use the idea of complexity to explain that a little bit. So when you have acute pain, let's say pain from an injury, it's very probably the case that there's one thing wrong that's causing your pain. One predominant problem. So you've got a broken bone, you've got a sprained ankle, there's a knife in your back, you've got a sliver in your foot, you've got an infection. So there's one identifiable part of your whole that we can point at and say, aha, that's the problem. And that gives us a chance to fix that problem. You can get a surgery to knit something up, or take something out, or a drug to take away an infection.
Yeah.
Or you can just simply let it heal over time. So that's acute pain, and it's often relatively simple compared to chronic pain. There's a much greater chance now that you're dealing with a complex problem. So with chronic pain that's gone on for some period of time, it's more likely that problem is being maintained by some sort of complex dynamic relationship between the way the nervous system is acting and the immune system's acting and the autonomic nervous system, or maybe the psychological system, the way you think about it, the way you feel about it, anxiety, depression, sleep. All of these things can factor into chronic pain, and it's not just any one thing, and it's also these things are all kind of interacting in a complex way. So that's kind of a way to think about the difference between acute pain and chronic pain. And like I say, chronic pain is much more likely to be complex. That means you're not going to find the one thing and fix it the way a mechanic fixes a problem in a car.
Yeah.
But that's the way we approach it. That's your biomedical approach. That's what you tend to get when you go to doctors or PTs or too many people. They're looking for that one thing that's the problem. The person that's there wants to hear that there's one thing that's the problem. Have you found it? Have you found the problem? They don't want to hear you've got a complex problem, and you're going to get out of it through a process of slow, organic change over time. But that is the hard reality for lots of kinds of chronic pain. It's something that you didn't get into in one day. You're probably not going to get out of it in one day. Again, slow process of organic change.
Yeah, so there's a reason why this chapter might be at the end of the book, because we talk about movement health. You're actually just, you could enlarge that to say you're talking about health.
Yeah, exactly.
Psychological factors have come into this now, and everything kind of combines here when you start to talk about chronic pain. So it's a good place to end the discussion, because everything kind of comes together in one piece here when you talk about pain. So you've said that I think the 3 best ways to treat chronic pain or chronic low back pain, I don't remember which one it was, are exercise and cognitive behavioral therapy. And what was the other thing?
Oh, I can't remember. My general, I think one of the things that I was definitely exercise and cognitive behavioral therapy would be, I think, some evidence-based ways to go about dealing with chronic pain and low back pain. In a more general sense, one of the claims I'm making is that you can just go about trying to make yourself a healthy person in general. So anything that makes you a healthy person in general, I'm talking about like quitting smoking, getting better sleep, getting better nutrition if that's a problem, getting some exercise if you're sedentary, dealing with depression or anxiety if you have either of those issues. Just kind of working on your general health is a plausible way to work on a chronic pain problem, and probably just as effective as anything else you could do. There definitely won't be magic bullets, but those are very plausible ways to go about treating a chronic pain problem, including chronic low back pain.
Right. So cognitive behavioral therapy actually looks at the feelings and reasons behind what you do. Is that correct?
Yeah. It's kind of like, for example, if you had kind of thought pattern, well, we know that the way you think can affect back pain. For example, if you think that your back pain is caused by some horrible structural damage back there, that it's never going to get better, and that there's nothing you can do about it. Yeah. Those are bad thoughts. They're probably untrue. They're probably making your pain worse, and they're probably changeable. So cognitive therapy would basically mean trying to alter your thoughts so you're not thinking that anymore. So what you're thinking, this pain is not necessarily caused by damaged structures in your back, which may very well be true. You should also understand that pain very often gets better. That's true. And one of the predictors of getting better from pain is self-efficacy, the belief that you are the person who can do something to affect your pain. So cognitive therapy would mean changing those unhelpful cognitions. And behavioral therapy would mean going out and doing something in a way that kind of also changes your cognitions and your thought patterns. So if you think it's impossible for me to, do a certain activity because of my back pain, and then you actually go do it, that's powerful evidence for you that, hey, I can really do it. That changes your whole kind of mindset about this thing, and can change your pain as well.
So our mindset is just so powerful, and our mindset about our health and about personal growth, both very powerful.
Yeah, there's the great Feldenkrais line, we move and feel in accordance with our self-image. Yeah. Now, if your self-image is that I'm broken, I'm screwed, I can't do anything about this situation, I'm powerless, I'll never run again. I've had clients that have thought, I've got the knee of a 70-year-old, I'll never run again. And so my message to them was, let's try an experiment. Let's go out and see if you can run again. I know that doctor said X, Y, and Z, but I happen to know some research that says he's probably wrong, but forget that. Let's just prove it to yourself. Try to go out and run this far, and then try to run that far, and maybe you can do this. And through acting, they were able to get a visceral sense that I don't have a 70-year-old knee. They changed their image of their knee, so they changed their behavior and the way they felt.
Yeah. So there's just a great reason for making pain one of the last chapters in the book, because, like I say, everything really does come together into that chapter.
Yeah, and it's so important too. I mean, I really feel for the people that are hurting, and it's a huge problem we have in our society, and it's an unsolved problem how to treat it. And
Yeah. So acute pain is a defense mechanism because, like you say, you might have a knife in your back or something. But
yeah,
but actually, chronic pain is also a defense mechanism.
Yeah.
Because, there's things you can't cope with, and you need that pain sometimes.
Yeah.
Strange but true, I think.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. So I don't want to summarize for you, but I've gotten out of this discussion that human beings are complex, cannot be fixed with a simple tip or two. And
yeah.
so,
Well, not always. Well, let's say you have a knife in your back. I do a simple tip or two for you to fix that.
There you go. Yeah, you're right. Sometimes you're right. There's occasions where you can.
So definitely, Yeah. And sometimes there is, a problem that can be fixed. Always go to your doctor and see if they can find it.
Right.
But if they can't, then it's playing with movement. Then it's exploring on your own, working on your general health, trying this, trying that, talking with people online, seeing what works.
Now, can you comment on this? It seems like so many times playing with movement is the very last thing that people will possibly try. Because if somebody can fix me, I don't want to put any effort into this. I don't want to put any focus on it. And it goes so contrary to what our culture is about, that playing with movement is so powerful, and it's just completely hidden from sight. The benefits you can get from finding the improvement you can get from a tiny little thing that you learned are so powerful, and they're hidden from public sight usually.
Yeah, that's the self-efficacy piece. That's the belief that you're the person that can make yourself better. Yeah. And that's kind of taken away. People are disempowered by very common messages you see from, the medical establishment, one of which it would be, I can fix that. Yeah. So it makes people passive, thinking that they just have to wait around to get fixed.
Yeah.
Another one is stand up straight, don't move like that. A very common idea to pathologize normal and healthy ways of moving, which are just normal variations on maybe posture or movement, that well-meaning sports trainers or physical therapists will say, no, that's the wrong way to move. You need to move like this. And that can kind of discourage people from exploring healthy, completely normal ways to move. Probably not as big a factor as the first one I mentioned, but that can happen as well.
Yeah, so that's the classic example. In fact, you have a chapter about posture too. So it brings me back to my PTA studies where I had a professor, our main instructor, talk to us about posture, and he gave us an example of little exercises to take someone through that would make them as stiff as a rod. So,
yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
That's how well-intended advice can be counterproductive. Is that tell someone stand up straight, what happens? They stiffen up. Probably they're worse off now than when they started.
Yeah, so that advice there, you have the whole chapter on posture, but could definitely affect your self-image.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think we've really, really gotten to how important this subject is, because it's the only way that you can get some of the benefits that we're talking about. Self-discovery comes only through exploration. So what would you say that's most inspiring thing about your book?
Well, I guess the message that I really want to send is, I guess, just what you were mentioning, empowering people to go out and try to take control of the situation, realize that they do have some control over it. That's kind of the major message. Yeah. And, give people a sense of hope and optimism about their ability to make changes. Okay. And also to dispel some unhelpful myths that are out there.
Yeah. So that's great. I have a friend who just took maybe an initial course on a little bit of continuing it on chronic pain. And I think you kind of answered some of her question a little bit, which would be, how do you educate the patient on chronic pain when you know that tissue damage is not necessarily correlating with with how they feel. So
yeah, well, it can be tricky to educate someone on the cause for their pain because they've got all of their own preconceived notions. You don't know exactly what all those are. Some of your good explanations for why they hurt could be taken the wrong way. One very well-known or much discussed kind of misfire of pain education that I've heard recently is well, let's say you're learning about pain. You learn that the brain plays a big role in pain. You know, your thoughts, a lot of pain messages are processed up here. That's very important to understand as a clinician. But if you tell that to someone who's hurting, it can sound very much like pain is in your head.
Yeah.
And you really don't want to do that.
Right.
Because it sounds like you're saying pain isn't real, or you're imagining your pain, or you should be able to think your pain away. Those things are totally false.
Yeah.
Pain, you have to be careful to get that kind of a message.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's better oftentimes just to experiment with a few things and get them turned in the direction of experimentation.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this idea of complexity too, getting the pain is complex. It depends on very, very many different things. Lots of things matter for pain. Pain's inherently unpredictable. I think if you stick with something like that, that's pretty safe. Also, people tend to get it. You know, people tend to get ideas like stress can cause a heart attack. Well, it can cause back pain too.
Yeah, there you go.
People may have a personal experience of that too.
Yeah. All right. So hopefully everybody has gotten a really clear understanding of how important this is, self-discovery and personal growth. And we do that very much through movement. So I want to really express my appreciation for you being here tonight. And I want to really recommend the book, Playing with Movement. What's the subtitle, Todd?
Playing with Movement, How to Explore the Many Dimensions of Physical Health and Performance. You can get it on Kindle or paperback on Amazon.
Yeah. So,
I think Barnes & Noble too.
So if people would like to work with you further or know more about you, do you have a website or some contact information you'd like to pass along?
Yeah, you can find me on the web at bettermovement.org. I'm on Twitter. I think it's just Todd Hargrove, and you can find me on Facebook too. So I post on Twitter, Facebook, and my blog. Okay,
great. Okay, so I'm going to look here real quickly. I think we have somebody else on here. And we're going to see who that, it's Violet. So I'm going to allow her to talk and see if she wants to ask any questions. So let's see. Violet, can you hear me?
Here we go.
Yeah, would you like to ask any questions of Todd before we sign off here?
No, I got no questions. I just really enjoyed the talk and enjoyed hearing you and seeing you, Todd. I've been reading your stuff for a long time. So
thank you, Violet.
He writes very clearly.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting here. But so what I'm going to do, let's see. We're going to stop the recording.